let's take you on an exciting journey full of unexpected events. Our story begins with Joe, a young man living in London who inherits a small cafe from his father. Joe's life was simple and quiet until a beautiful girl named Camelia walked into his cafe. From the first glance, Joe was captivated by Camelia's beauty and couldn't stop thinking about her. After their first encounter, Joe started pondering how to talk to her and get to know her better. But what if this admiration turned into an obsession? Joe begins to follow Camelia's every move, discovering personal information about her through social media. Despite this, they start a love story that seems at first like a typical romance, but things take an unexpected turn. One day, Camelia faces a big problem that forces her to leave London, and that's when things start to go dark. Joe, terrified of losing her, makes a dangerous decision to keep his beloved by his side. Will their love story continue, or will things turn into a nightmare? Exciting developments, unexpected events, and risky decisions made by the characters. Don't miss watching this thrilling and suspenseful video. Grab a cup of coffee and enjoy this captivating story. For those new to my channel, I'm Dora. I talk about real crimes, discuss scary topics, and sometimes share stories, while at other times, we cover real-life topics. Don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications on my channel. My dream is to reach 100,000 subscribers this year, so I hope for your support. There was a young man named Joe living in London who inherited a coffee shop from his father. One day, a very beautiful girl walked in. Joe was mesmerized by her beauty and fell in love at first sight. The girl asked Joe for coffee, which he served her with a smile, feeling even happier upon seeing her up close. Returning to his work, Joe kept thinking about how he could talk to her and get to know her better. He approached the table where she was sitting, cleaned it, and discreetly took a small notebook she had left on the table. Unaware, the girl left the cafe and Joe secretly followed her, discovering where she lived. He watched her house from afar and saw her undressing through the window, which made him even more infatuated. Joe then stole some of her clothes from the balcony and went home, pleased. Browsing through the notebook, Joe learned a lot about her, including her name, Camelia. He searched for her on social media, found her Facebook account, and saw her photos, which deepened his admiration. He also found out the university she attended, her love for Japanese food, that she lived alone in London, her American origins, and her circle of friends. Later, Camelia realized she had lost her diary and tried to remember where she might have left it. After her classes, she went to the cafe and asked Joe if he had seen her notebook. Joe smiled and said he had seen it on the table the previous day and had kept it for her. She thanked him, and he confessed to reading a little of it, apologizing for the intrusion. She accepted his apology, and Joe asked her out to a Japanese restaurant. She agreed, they exchanged numbers, and Joe called her that night to set up the dinner. At the restaurant, they bonded over their shared love for matcha and began to enjoy each other's company. Camelia ordered sake, and they both drank until they were tipsy. Joe helped her home, and she invited him in. They spent the night together and began a romantic relationship. Camelia introduced Joe to her friends, who liked him, and they all had a fun evening together. However, things took a turn when Camelia had to go to America due to an unforeseen problem. She struggled with how to tell Joe about it, knowing he had a troubled past and a fear of abandonment due to his father's abuse. Joe, distraught by the news, planned a special dinner at his farm, drugged Camelia, and locked her in a large glass cage when she fell asleep. She woke up the next day to find herself trapped, surrounded by white. The room was in a basement, and Joe went down there and started talking to Camelia. He told her, "I fear being apart for too long, so you will stay here for the rest of your life." Camelia began screaming at him, demanding to be let out, threatening to call the police. Joe pulled her phone from his pocket and said, "There is no way to contact the outside world." He placed a device inside the cage, instructing her to press a button if she needed anything, which would alert him in his room. He then took her phone and posted on her social media accounts that she had left without plans to return. Everyone believed she had left because she hated farewells. Joe tried to calm her down, explaining that there was no escape and that only he could let her out. He left her some food and exited the room. Camelia remained in the cage, trying in vain to escape. Hunger eventually overcame her, and she ate the food Joe had provided. The next day, Joe found the room in disarray. He told her, "This is where you will live for the rest of your life. Why did you do this?" He gave her more food and sat down to talk with her, ignoring her pleas to be freed. This routine continued for a week. On the 7th day, Camelia decided to seduce Joe to lure him into the cage. Her plan worked, and Joe entered. She then grabbed a tray and hit him on the head. Enraged, he grabbed her by the neck and choked her until her face turned blue, only to realize he had nearly killed her. Deciding to torture her differently, he tied her to a chair, inserted a needle into her vein, and let her blood flow. However, he didn't intend to kill her, but to teach her a lesson. He closed the valve from a distance and didn't inform her. Believing she was bleeding out, Camelia died of a heart attack from sheer terror. Joe was shocked and devastated by her death. After mourning, he decided to dispose of her body discreetly. He dismembered her, placed the remains in a large bag, and took them to a nearby furnace. After paying the furnace operator, he incinerated her remains to ashes and scattered them, hoping for her forgiveness. Returning home sorrowfully, Joe was seen by a brunette girl who tried to comfort him, but he initially refused to talk. After 2 hours, she knocked on his door again, and he let her in, hugging her tightly. They both cried together. Feeling some warmth and compassion from her, they started talking. Her name was Eva. Joe found her beautiful and worthy of love, despite his lingering sadness. Eva stayed with him for a day, making breakfast in the morning, which cheered Joe up. He learned she was 22 years old, close to his age, and worked at a beauty salon. She showed him her pedicure skills on her phone, and he was impressed, asking her to give him a pedicure. Pleased with her work, Joe asked her to move in with him, to which she happily agreed. Eva brought her belongings from her house next door and moved in with Joe. He resumed work at his cafe, feeling happy with Eva. After a week, Joe had forgotten about Camelia, and Eva became his new love. Suddenly, while he was working, Camelia walked through the cafe door, and Joe was shocked by what he saw. Is this real, or am I just imagining it? Many thoughts ran through his mind when he saw her. Did she come back to life after I killed her, or what happened? He sat in shock, staring at the girl in front of him. She ordered the same coffee Camelia used to drink, but when she spoke, her voice wasn't Camelia's, though it was similar. She looked just like Camelia in every way except for her voice. Joe was astonished and felt like life had given him a second chance to be with his beloved. He thought a lot about what to do, how to talk to her, and whether to use the same approach he used with Camelia. Without thinking too much, he went up to her directly and asked, "Would you like to have dinner with me at a Japanese restaurant?" The girl laughed at Joe's boldness and liked it. She said, "Of course I'd like that, but why did you choose me?" He told her, "You resemble my old girlfriend who died in an accident." She sympathized with him and accepted the invitation. However, Joe was already in a relationship with Eva and feared hurting her feelings, So he continued with the new girl without Eva knowing. That evening, he called the girl and arranged to meet at a restaurant. They went there, and he ordered her matcha, the same dish he had ordered for Camelia. The girl loved it. They started talking, and he learned her name was Sophia, a 22-year-old Canadian in her final year of nursing school. She was excited about graduating in 3 days and planned a big party, inviting all her friends. She invited Joe to the party, and he immediately agreed. The party was in 3 days. They left the restaurant happy to have met and become good friends. Joe returned home to find Eva waiting for him. He hugged her, gave her a kiss, and happily went to bed, thinking about Sophia. Eva noticed his happiness and asked, "Did something happen today?" He replied, "No, nothing happened." She asked, "Why are you so happy then?" He said, "I met someone unique in this universe." Eva didn't dwell on it, and they watched a movie together, happily falling asleep. Later, Joe got out his laptop and started researching Sophia. He found her pictures and learned about her interests and favorite places. He decided to go to her party and knew she loved jigsaw puzzles. He planned to bring one as a gift. Before the party, he bought the puzzle and an elegant, expensive suit. He attended the party, bringing the puzzle. When Sophia saw Joe, she admired his elegance and handsomeness. Hugging him and complimenting his appearance, he gave her the puzzle, and she was thrilled, asking how he knew she loved it. He told her he had guessed based on her behavior, and that he also loved puzzles as a child. Sophia felt they had a special connection, and their mutual admiration grew. They enjoyed a beautiful evening together, and Joe returned home, forgetting in his happiness to take off his expensive suit. Eva sensed something was wrong, becoming suspicious. Joe changed into his pajamas and went to bed. Eva, filled with negative thoughts, picked up Joe's phone, unlocked it with facial recognition, and started searching. She found pictures of Camelia and messages between Joe and her. Suspicious, she looked at his recent calls and found the latest one with Sophia. She found Sophia's Facebook profile and noticed a strong resemblance to Camelia. Overcome with jealousy and suspicion, she woke Joe and asked how Camelia died. Joe sensed she knew he had killed Camelia and lied. "I don't know. She died in an accident." Eva looked at him with a gaze full of doubt. Joe felt strange and scared of Eva, suggesting they go on a trip to the farm for a morning swim. Eva thought about it and agreed. They went to the farm, and Joe didn't intend to kill her, just to put her in a cage. Eva was impressed with the house and asked why he hadn't told her about it before. She began exploring while Joe prepared food mixed with drugs. Eva continued exploring and found a small door outside that led to a basement. Curious, she entered and discovered a large glass cage with traces of blood and hair. She realized the hair matched Camelia's color and knew it belonged to her. She started screaming and rushed to the basement at high speed. He was afraid that one of the neighbors might hear her screaming, so he grabbed a large stick and struck her on the head with great force. When he hit her, her head exploded, and blood splattered all over the basement. She died instantly. This incident happened at 4 a.m. Joe was worried that the neighbors might have heard Eva's scream. He kept watch and noticed that one of their neighbors was looking at the farm from a distance. Joe decided to bury the body in the basement. He dug a grave inside the basement, placed the body there, and closed the basement. When evening came, he left the farm and went to his house, afraid that Eva's family might see him. He called Sophia and told her, "I'm in trouble. My house is flooded, and I need to stay at your place for a while." Sophia hesitated at first, but then agreed, inviting him to her home. She welcomed and hugged him, saying, "Don't worry, we'll fix the house as soon as possible." He pretended to be sad about the house, but he was really sad about Ava, whom he had killed. He and Sophia talked about how the house got flooded, and he seemed very sad. Sophia started to cheer him up because he was extremely distressed. They began playing Monopoly and got to know each other better. The next day, Eva's mother called him and asked if he knew where Eva was. He told her that he didn't know, but that they had a fight yesterday and broke up. After that, she left, and he didn't know where she went. He thought of fixing the problem and used Eva's phone to write a message to her mother, reassuring her and saying that Eva was depressed and didn't want to talk to anyone, but was okay. Then he turned off the phone and hid it in a secret place. His relationship with Sophia grew stronger, and after 2 weeks, Joe fell in love with her. He met her family, and the girl loved him very much. She told him that she didn't want him to leave her house. He agreed, feeling happy. One day, they wanted to go on a picnic and went to an area near Joe's farm. They were sitting by the lake, preparing food, but Joe was worried because neighbors who knew him well lived in this area. Suddenly, one of the neighbors came up behind Joe, put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Hello, Joe. Why don't you come to your farm?" Joe stammered, and Sophia, hearing this, asked, "Really? You have a farm here?" He said yes. She asked why he hadn't shown it to her or told her about it. He replied that he would show it to her soon. She insisted on seeing it that day. They went to the farm, and Joe was very scared. Sophia inspected the house on the farm and liked it a lot. She decided to sleep there, and Joe was very nervous about that night. Indeed, Eva slept in the bedroom with Joe and noticed that he was very anxious. During the night, Sophia smelled a foul odor coming from under the room. It was the smell of Eva's decomposing body. She started searching the house for the source of the smell, but found nothing. She went outside the house and found a large white bag. From there, she traced the smell. She removed the bag and saw a small door. She opened the door and the smell spread. She put her hand over her mouth, went down, and turned on the light. She saw the room, the dug-up area, and felt it was a grave. Sophia was extremely frightened. Suddenly, behind her, Joe was holding the same stick he had used to hit Eva. She turned and saw him, terrified. He tried to hit her with the stick, but the blow landed on her hand, and she ran away quickly. She locked the door, sat on it, and tried to call the police. She contacted the police, who came to the scene and rescued Sophia. They started searching for Joe, but he had disappeared. If you want a second part of the story, please subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and don't forget to like and follow the channel. Share the story with friends. Love you all, Dora.